Hello, and welcome to Read the Bull, the only podcast dedicated to finance and investing books. I'm your host, Stefan Prelog, and this is our first episode of 2023. I know, it's the middle of February. Give me a break. But welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. I wanted to start this episode with a 2023 book preview. So at the end of last year, I was combing through a lot of publisher websites, looking at books coming out this year. And there were also a lot of good book lists coming out, but of course, very few business and finance books on those lists. So I curated my 23 books of 2023. You can go to readthebull.com to check them out. But today I'm going to just talk about a few of those books. It's a great list. You'll see on the list there are multiple books about financial fraud. There are a few books about financial crashes and their impact on the economy and society, and one that looks at the investors who profit from crashes. There are also a couple of books about the monetary system, where the Federal Reserve plays a central role. There's one book on crypto, and the first book on FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. There are also a couple of good biographies out there, and I note a couple of classics with new editions that are coming out. We'll try to interview some of these authors, and later in the show, we're going to talk to Bill Falloon, executive editor at Wiley, one of the top business book publishers. We'll talk about some of the books on my list that are Wiley books and some of the books on Wiley's list, and talk to Bill about how he finds the business books that Wiley publishes. So without further ado, let's get into some of these books. There are some really good ones out there. This first one, published by St. Martin's Press, is coming out in November. It's The Fund, Ray Dalio, Bridgewater Associates, and the Unraveling of a Wall Street Legend. It's written by Rob Copeland, who is now a New York Times reporter, used to be with the Wall Street Journal for a long time. The book's about Ray Dalio, who's the billionaire founder of Bridgewater Associates. And if anyone knows Bridgewater, it's one of the largest hedge funds in the world and has a very kind of mysterious culture. And that's how Rob Copeland got interested in them and started reporting on them, talking to former employees and people associated with the firm, started to uncover some things that were going on inside the firm. Ray Dalio famously fought back and has had an ongoing battle with Rob Copeland. So this book promises to be really interesting. Again, if anyone knows Ray Dalio and Bridgewater, this is going to be one a must read for many people. And I'm curious to see how Ray Dalio and Bridgewater approach the publication of this book. So again, it's coming out later this year. I think it says November, but it might be coming out a little earlier. So definitely one of the top ones on our list. Another one that's coming out March by Harvard Business Review, Fool Me Once, Scams, Stories, and Secrets from the $1 Trillion Fraud Industry. This book is by Kelly Richmond Pope. She's a forensic accountant and a professor at DePaul University. She's also a filmmaker who analyzes corporate crime. So this is going to be really interesting. She shows fraud in action, basically trying to uncover what makes perps tick, what makes victims so gullible. So she looks at Bernie Madoff, Elizabeth Holmes, and others, and looks at why people are so easily duped, and also why people become whistleblowers. So this book, very interesting. Again, fraud is a prevalent topic on our book preview list, and this one certainly sounds interesting. Next one, Abrams Press, coming out July this year. This is Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud. It's written by Ben McKenzie and Jacob Silverman. Fans of the OC and Gotham will know the name Ben McKenzie. He is an actor. Jacob Silverman is a contributing editor at the New Republic. If you're on Twitter, follow crypto, Ben McKenzie he's an actor, but he's gone down a rabbit hole and was lured into cryptocurrency. He was interested in it, became very active on Twitter talking about it, and now has teamed up with Jacob Silverman to write a book about it. So it should be very interesting. I know a lot of people think Ben McKenzie has a very interesting view on cryptocurrency, so that'll be one to watch for sure. Next book I want to highlight is Warren Buffett, Investor and Entrepreneur. This one's written by Todd Finkel. and it's going to be published in March by Columbia's Business School Publishing. So you're probably thinking, why do we need another book about Warren Buffett? And I would say, normally I would agree. I did a Barnes & Noble search and came up when I entered Warren Buffett, there were 255 books with Warren Buffett, either in the title or the subject of the book. So there have been books about him, his life, his investing style, his portfolio. Every way you want to analyze Warren Buffett and his life, seems there's a book that has done it. So why is this one different? Well, Finkel is a Buffett family friend, and he's going to share his perspective on Buffett's early life and business adventure. So this one has a little bit more of a personal bent. I don't know if there are a lot of people close to Buffett who have written books about him. So this one sounds a little interesting. So we'll see about that. Chaos Kings: How Wall Street Traders Make Billions in the New Age of Crisis. So it's written by Scott Patterson, published by Scribner, and it's coming out in June of this year. So Scott Patterson is a veteran Wall Street Journal reporter. He's taking a deep dive into billion-dollar traders and people who look at crisis predictors. So very interested in this one. He looks at basically two factions. One is led by Nassim Nicholas Taleb and Mark Spitznagel. People who know Nassim Taleb know that name. The author of The Black Swan, which is the premise where humans can never see the big disaster coming. Mark Spitznagel, who we partnered with, Mark started the firm Universa to basically take advantage of crashes for investors so that they can benefit from those downturns. He looks at then a second faction that believes chaos can be detected. Scott Patterson, a veteran Wall Street Journal reporter. This book is going to be really interesting. Full disclosure, I worked with Mark Spitznagel for a number of years. I worked on his first book, The Tao of Capital. Yeah, this promises to be a very good book. Very interested in this one. We have, like I said, a couple books that are celebrating anniversaries. So updated editions, the 50th anniversary of A Random Walk Down Wall Street. This is, of course, the book by Princeton professor Burton Malkiel, published by W.W. Norton and Company. The new edition is out. I know Burton's done a lot of press already, but again, 50 years, it's quite a testament to this book that stood the test of time. It's cited as always cited as one of the great investment books. It is interesting because he does talk about, basically, it's a gimmick-free investing guide, and really talks about how most investors should really just buy a set of index funds, and you can achieve above average investment and results. Over the past, probably 10, 15 years, Burton has gotten involved in some active investing funds, but, he still maintains that buying a diversified set of index funds is the best way for most investors. So that'll be interesting. Next book is another updated version of a very popular book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This is the third edition. The original was published in 2004. It's by John Perkins, by Brett Kohler Publishers. If people are familiar with this one, in his original 2004 book, it was an account of Perkins' career with an engineering consulting firm, Chastity, Maine, based in Boston. In the book, he basically alleged that the NSA arranged for him to be, he was trained as an economic hitman, where he would go in and convince leaders of the underdeveloped countries to accept substantial loans for large construction engineering projects, thus trapping them in the American system of influence and control. So very popular book, really insightful. I know it was criticized a bit. This one, the third edition, which is coming out the end of February, is going to look on the corruption, on focus on China. So basically looking at, again, the economic hitmans who use development loans to cheat countries around the globe. This one, he's looking at the way China optimizes economic hitman. So a little bit of a different take. And that one's particularly going to be really interesting. For Blood and Money, Billionaires, Biotech, and the Quest for a Blockbuster Drug by Nathan Vardy. W.W. Norton and Company. This one just came out in January and really interesting. It's a scientific thriller, basically, that looks at what it takes to bring a wonder drug to the market. Nathan Vardy is a longtime business reporter. And he looks at the industry of biotech, where pharmaceutical companies, the government, and hedge funds basically come in and spend billions on funding, experimentation, and treatments, and look at that whole process and look at a specific company here to tell this story. So that's going to be interesting. So those are just a few books we're highlighting. Again, you can go to readthebull.com for the full list of 23 books in 2023. And as I noted, we're going to be joined by Bill Falloon, executive editor at Wiley, talk about some of the books on his list and some of the ones that I've highlighted from Wiley. So without further ado, let's bring Bill on. So I'm joined today by Bill Falloon of Wiley. He's an executive editor, finance and investment books at John Wiley & Sons. I'll just call it a top business publisher, involved in publishing trade books, research journals, and higher ed learning materials. So, welcome, Bill. How are you doing?
Stefan, really enjoyed being on your program. I applaud finance and investment books. Sometimes they're often forgotten, but there's some great reads out there.
Yeah, there certainly are, and agree, and that's part of the reason why we're doing this podcast. So, thank you for joining me. I was saying at the top of the program that, I usually interview authors, but I also want to interview editors and agents. So, really appreciate you coming on to talk about some of the books in your slate and how you find good books. And how long have you been at Wiley?
I think this is my 21st year, and that speaks to the joy of working with authors. It's a wonderful profession. And one thing I should mention about myself is I've also been an author. So I've lived the experience from both an author trying to get published and someone who's recruiting authors. So it's an exciting business.
Okay. What was the book that you had? What was the book you wrote?
The first book I wrote was called Charlie D, The Story of the Legendary Bond Trader. Okay. And back in the day when there was open outcry, Charlie was a top stair trader in the bond pit. And he was larger than life, had a very successful career as a pit trader. And he also had an interesting story that three of his family members came down with different forms of lymphoma. So there was an investigation into the environmental risk related to his hometown. And of course, that added a human drama element to the story. Both his brother and his mother and Charlie himself all had similar illnesses.
Oh, wow. And how long ago was that? That's an interesting topic, and I know those bond pit traders have a lot of great stories.
Yeah, Charlie was in his prime in the 80s. I'll call him the Michael Jordan of trading. He actually played golf with Michael Jordan. Okay, but that was the heyday of pit trading when the bond pit was moving thousands of contracts, and it was people flowing out of the pit, bursting with energy. And what a time in Chicago. So, Of course, if you're a journalist, which I was at the time, that was one of the key things to cover was the Chicago Board of Trade.
So, and look, Wiley's published, a lot of great business books over the years. I know you've been involved in some, and I think you've been involved with some of the Jack Bogle books, correct?
Yes. Working with Mr. Bogle, and that's what I will call him forever, was just a fabulous experience. In truth, I think that one of the reasons that Vanguard has been so successful is Mr. Bogle was an evangelist for index investing through his books. I think he, before he died, he had written 13 or 14 books.
Yeah.
I have a personal favorite called Enough, which is about all just business life principles. But perhaps the best known books are Common Sense on Mutual Funds and the little book of Common Sense Investing, which is we published the 10th anniversary edition, which he traditionally liked to do with all of his books because his thinking changed over time. So, yeah, it was just an absolute joy to work with him.
Yeah. And I got to work with him on that book enough, and it was definitely a highlight of my career. I worked, I believe, on 2 or 3 of his books, and Enough was one of them. So I know we shared that experience, and just an incredible person to work with. I guess I can share one story because I think, I don't know if it was Enough or one of the other books, and anyone who knows, we'll call him Mr. Bogle. If anyone knows Mr. Bogle, well, the story won't come as a surprise, but he had, he's deceased now, but this was back in, I think, 2006, 2007, and he was having some heart issues back then, and was in the hospital and was having this book come out and was doing work from the hospital bed. And I remember him telling the nurse to leave him alone, that he was doing work. And I'm sure his wife was very happy that he was doing work from the hospital bed. But, that was Mr. Bogle.
Yes. I have to relay another personal story, and this is one I've told reporters, but he was one time coming into New York City from Philadelphia or the Vanguard headquarters. And of course, he would take the train, take a cab with his assistant and get ready for a meeting. And at this time, he had to be in his 70s, maybe his 80s. And, it's not so easy getting around New York City when you're that age. But he comes in to the meeting and he kicks down a chair and he said, "I need to take a little nap for 20 minutes." And so he kicked down the chair. He leaned his head on the back of the chair and fell asleep on the floor. And before he went to sleep, he said, "Bill, if anybody interrupts my sleep, just tell them there's a dead man in the other room." And I could not believe he said that. It was so funny. And of course, at 80 years old, he was running circles around everybody else. I've never seen anybody with quite the energy that Mr. Bogle had. So wonderful personal experiences with him.
Yeah, absolutely. It was such a thrill, and you're absolutely right. He had so much energy and zest for life, and I will, again, one of the highlights of my career that I got to work with him. So that's great. So tell me some of the other big books that you've done in your career, other ones you've been, been proud of or just thought were really great. Or, I know it's been a long career there, but just any other ones you want to mention?
Yeah, recently I've been doing some books in the crypto space, and the Bitcoin Standard by Safety Moose stands out. He's an Austrian economist. The book really tells the history of money in a way that brings us up to the present, which involving cryptocurrencies. And the Bitcoin Standard is in reference to the gold standard and his belief that that's going to be the most valuable of currencies in terms of retaining wealth and in times of difficulty. I've also had a really pleasant experience in the data visualization and data storytelling space. I've acquired a number of books. Cole Nussbaumer's The Storytelling with Data, the Big Book of Dashboards by a trio of authors, Andy Cotgreave, Steve Wexler, and Jeff Schaefer. And so one of the joys of publishing is getting sometimes outside your traditional discipline of publishing in finance and investment and trying things just because you think they're going to be interesting books. And those are books that I'm really proud of recently.
That's great. And Wiley also is famous for its Little Book series. Can you tell me a little about the Little Book series and some of the ones coming up in there?
Yes, happy to do so. So the Little Book series first started with Joel Greenblatt's The Little Book That Beats the Market. And it had a tagline, The Magic Formula. And it was his approach to outperforming, picking stocks, and beating the market. That book has since morphed into the little book that still beats the market, and really was one of those famous outliers of publishing in terms of its success. That involved into a series that Wiley's done. Mr. Bogle had the little book of common sense investing.
That's right.
I'm doing a little book called The Little Book of Stock Picking Gems, and it's by Martin Fridson, who is actually a famous Hall of Fame fixed income analyst. But the book is going to have some tips for individual investors on picking individual stocks in a a conservative way. You don't want to bet the farm on your stock picking, but it has a couple of new wrinkles in it that I won't reveal. I'll let the readers discover them when the book is published. And I believe it's coming out in late April.
Okay, great. We'll have to look out for that one. So there's a book on my preview list that I want to talk to you about, SBF, How the FTX Bankruptcy Unwound Crypto's Very Bad Good Guy. So I love the title. And as I was looking around, and I expect there will be a lot of books on SBF and the whole FTX debacle. And I know there is a book going to be written by Michael Lewis, and we'll talk about that. But this seemed to be the first book that I saw that was coming out this year. I think it has a publication date for May of this year. So tell me how that book came about. It's written by Brady Dales, who's a reporter. But tell me how that book came about and how you guys were able to get the seemingly the first book out on SBF and the whole FTX fraud.
Yes. So as I mentioned in my background, I was a former journalist myself. Mm-hmm. So I have a bias, or I love to publish underdogs, and Brady Dales is a really talented veteran reporter in the crypto markets. He's been doing it for 15 years. And what I like about Brady so much is currently he's with Axios, and right. He's just a real elegant explainer of complex topics. And what I think of as explainer journalism is something that I think is really needed when you have complex financial topics and there's a large audience that wants them demystified. And, that was kind of an interesting situation where the lead character, SBF, in the book goes from being called the next JP Morgan to potentially committing, criminal fraud. And right. That's going to be decided by the courts, I believe, sometime in October. But Brady just exhibited the real hustle and energy of a reporter that's passionate about writing a book. And as we all know from journalism, sometimes long form reporting is a lot more fun. You can dive into the story deeper. Sure. And I think that's why Brady signed with us. And of course, I know there's some great authors like Michael Lewis doing books on the same topic. But I think Brady's going to have a few surprises and reveal a story in a way that's very useful to all investors around the world.
That's great. So there are going to be things that aren't reported, because this story obviously is, probably the biggest fraud price since, on this level since Madoff. And there's been so much reported, but Brady is going to unearth some things that haven't been reported. Is that your what you're telling us?
I think he's been okay. Yeah, I think he's been doing his homework, and when you're in the competitive situation of multiple books coming out, I think that he will have a few surprises, but most importantly, I think the story will be well told and understood in a way that will be useful to investors thinking about those markets.
Right.
I don't know if you've tried to trade any cryptocurrencies or invest in them, but I did a book by the Duke professor Campbell Harvey, who's an award-winning professor in finance, and he's been teaching decentralized finance to the students of Duke. And he in his book he revealed some new decentralized principles that may make Wall Street obsolete. I mean, at some point, we may be able to execute transactions in the decentralized finance world seamlessly at lower cost. And so that is a real exciting space. Some of the cryptocurrencies that I hadn't heard about, Campbell Harvey revealed in his book, and I've taken a little stake in them myself, just because I thought he knows what he's talking about, and a couple of them are up about 300%. So, and I don't take any big positions, anything that's too speculative. But lots of times I like to bet on my authors indirectly when I think they're really insightful with their observations.
Well, I like that. All right. So, but not any big stakes. So you're still going to be editing for a while. You didn't make any huge money there, but a couple little stakes. Okay. All right. No. Well, that's fun though. No, I like you're bolder than I am. I have not waded into the crypto investing pool as of yet, but I know it's an evolving space. It's an interesting space. And like you said, it's ever evolving, and I'm sure with FTX, but there are also other books, like you said, looking at the technology and talking about the decentralization of money, and it's endlessly fascinating. So I think this is obviously going to be a topic that's going to be ripe for more books. So talking about fascinating, I want to jump quickly to another book that you flagged for me that I am going to put on my list because it has a great title, and it's one of probably the most ambitious books I think out there. Pricing the Priceless: The Journey to Value the Planet and Protect What We Need and Love Most by Paula DiPerna. So tell me about this book.
Yes. So Paula has a real interesting backstory. She was part of the film crews with Jacques Cousteau. And so she's kind of has an environmentalist, protect the planet background. Sure. But she's also been very active in the decarbonization of the planet as well. The idea of helping get to the net zero economy by 2050. But because of her background in finance as well, she has the view that to really get people to take action, you need to price things.
Right.
And what's so interesting about the book is, take SpaceX or Tesla, innovations that are involving exploration and companies that go from zero to literally billions of dollars of capitalization. Her whole point and what she's researching is what is the true value of all the ecosystems on this planet. And once we attempt to price them, maybe it suggests that we need to be a little more serious about taking care of a scarce resource. So the book I think of as a kind of a new Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. Mm-hmm. Paula, is one of those financial adults that Greta Thunberg is telling us we need to be more responsible. And so I think the book really has an interesting hook because of her background in finance and carbon reduction, and also her environmentalist background.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly fascinating that she's trying to value like things like the atmosphere and like basically trying to put a value on our planet. And certainly with the background in finance, it's an interesting perspective and an interesting approach. And you're right. How do you get people on the investment side, and because you have to bring these kind of two sides together if we're going to try to protect the planet and our resources. So that's really fascinating. So, and when does that come out?
I believe it's May. So these are the newest books.
Yeah.
So as you can see, I'm dabbling in the crypto financial debacle world. I'm dabbling in the theme of sustainability and how it relates to finance. So there's no shortage of great ideas, and that's what I'm always looking for when I first decide to publish a book.
That's great. And I want to ask you about that. But yeah, I think you're right. You could always get a sense of kind of the themes in our society, themes in the world of finance by looking at some of these books. And I was talking about how, there's sustainability, money, and the demise of the dollar is always kind of a theme, and the decentralization of money. Financial frauds are always kind of a hot topic. There's some good bios, some good people coming out. But you mentioned you can find good topics, but how do you get out there? Do authors come to you? Are a lot of the books, that you end up publishing, do you find them on your own? Is it through agents? Tell me a little bit about that process, and how have you found some of your recent books?
I'm happy to. So usually when a book is brought in by an agent, you are receiving a formal proposal. The best agents really button down a project. So you have an idea of the topic, some of the key takeaways, what the author is bringing to the equation, and being in a unique position to tell a story or to inform someone about a new financial instrument or whatever the topic of the book is. But when you're dealing with an agent, the proposals come in ready-made, and it's a matter of if you are going to win through an auction or you're going to win through a relationship that you have track record in a space. So the agent's coming to you believing that you have an edge as a publisher and as an editor. But there is also the road less traveled, which is authors that don't have agents, but they're brilliant people and they're passionate. They're creative by nature, and they want to do a project. In which case, I send them a proposal template. I do my very best to represent them as a surrogate agent. I'm almost the ears and eyes in a proposal meeting. And, in those instances, the advances may not be as large, etc. But books can be a defining moment in someone's career. I mentioned a couple of very successful first-time authors of the Bitcoin Standard and Storytelling with Data. And a book can serve many purposes as the world's largest business card, or as establishing your identity for public speaking and just being a creative. There's nothing more difficult than writing a book. So once someone has jumped that hurdle of doing a proposal, whether they have an agent or not, I'm going to take a serious look at what they're pitching.
Yeah. How many, do you know offhand about how many proposals do you look at a year, and how many books you say yes to?
I like to think that maybe I'm receiving a proposal once every week, or prospecting and getting one. So I'll just say it might be 50 proposals in a year, exclude the holidays. And then, of course, I try to sign a couple dozen of those, maybe 20, 25 books in a year.
Okay.
And like any smart investor, I try to diversify my portfolio and acquire in different categories. I love that Wiley allows me to be creative and do what we call passion projects. We're just, why are we publishing it? Just because it resonated with us, and we think it might be something real exciting for readers. So yeah, so those are the kind of the two processes. If I could jump in and give some advice to authors,
Sure.
sometimes authors perceive a proposal as something that's a lot of work that they don't want to do. And as someone who's written books myself and watched other authors do it, the proposal really becomes your roadmap for preparing the book. You can reuse a lot of the
Sure.
proposal. Maybe it becomes dust jacket copy. So it is very valuable work to do. And at the moment you have writer's block, you can always refer back to your proposal, your table of contents you outlined, and it will set you free whenever you're facing challenges of getting through those difficult periods when you're writing a book.
Well, that's good advice. Yeah. Yeah, I think people look at the proposal process as kind of, a little tedious, and it's, you have all these sections you have to put in there and make sure you're communicating what the book's about and how you're going to promote it. But you're right. It gives you the template to succeed for the book. So it's obviously a very important part of the process. So that's good advice and really helpful. So talk to me. I know Wiley's known as a trade publisher, but you said, they've done so many great books over the years, and I've worked with them a bit earlier in my career when I was a book publicist and did a lot of great books. They do really have a great variety of books, but like you meant, we were talking about Joel Greenblatt earlier. How did Joel Greenblatt, who's this great iconic investor, do you know how that story, how he became an author? Did he come to you? Did he come to Wiley, or did Wiley approach him?
Yeah, so I remember the story very well. I wasn't his original editor. His original editor was a colleague of mine named David Pugh. And David brought in the book, and, it was kind of a short book on investing, written in kind of a very unique style. It wasn't something that necessarily was easily embraced right
Right.
away. And I think David did an excellent job of pitching the book and playing up some of Joel's author platform and fame, and also really communicating why the book was unique. And so that's the backstory on the launch of that book.
Was David also the one who did the David Einhorn book?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So you'll have to refresh my memory on the title. I think it was the
Fools. I was fooling some of the people all of the time. Yeah. So, and again, that's part of the reason I got into the whole industry is I did the PR on that book, and I think it's actually the 15th anniversary of that book. I can't even believe it's been 15 years. I'm hoping, I know David's very busy and has 100 other things going on, but I'm hoping he'll accept my invitation later this year, because again, that book we talked about, Jack Bogle as a career highlight, but David Einhorn, working with him, particularly in 2007, 2008, when that book came out, was, you couldn't ask for just better timing in terms of someone to work with and just what was going on in the world. And that was, it was a story of Allied Capital, a famous short of his. People may not remember that name, but it's a fascinating book and a great book. And then as the book was coming out, he also made his famous call on Lehman Brothers. So I'm hoping to get him back on the show. But yeah, that was a Wiley book. So you guys have done some just really amazing books, and it sounds like you have a lot more coming out. So just quickly, I think we just have a couple minutes left, but how do you feel about kind of the state of the publishing industry and the books that you have on your slate? It sounds like, it's a pretty exciting time, but I know there's been a lot of consolidation in the industry, but how do you feel overall?
Thank you for asking. I will tell you why I think it's a very exciting time in publishing. I know there are challenges. There's a debate: is print dead? Are ebooks dead? And I think I've seen some really interesting articles about how Barnes and Noble is bringing back the traditional reading experience, and how The old school readers really value that. There's also a renaissance in publishing going on with what I call getting books outside the spine. If you go into a university, you will see that there's online courses. Okay, there are training materials online. And I think what's happening is the book content is still king, and it's just a matter of setting books free outside the spine as well as inside the spine. And that's what really excites me. Of course, Wiley has its own online learning platforms, but you see Udacity, all these online learning platforms that a lot of readers and learners are going to. The whole success story of Khan Academy. I go there regularly myself just to take courses and learn things that I haven't learned before. So I think that's the real exciting part of publishing is it's becoming a multimedia business where it traditionally was, inside the spine.
It's endlessly fascinating, and I think there has been an evolution. You mentioned Barnes and Noble. I think it was helped a little bit by the pandemic a little bit, but I know James Daunt, the new CEO, came in after Elliott took the company private, and I think they've done an amazing job. But you're right. I think it's a very exciting time, and it has becoming a multimedia industry, and I think we'll start to see things evolve, even greater. So, agree 100%. So, Bill, any final thoughts? I really appreciate the time today. Anything else you want to add or plug?
Well, I just, when we're talking about why I'm so bullish on publishing, the whole audio movement is another important point to bring up. I think audiobooks are growing at a rate of 12%. It's a really high growth area. And I think readers, once again, when they're with their headphones exercising or they're doing different activities, that's really opened up books in a way that wasn't possible before. So the combination of book content and technology is really something to watch in the future.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into the whole AI and Chat GPT. We'll have to save that for another time, but I think that's going to be an interesting wrinkle in the whole publishing industry.
Oh, it will. And if you do a podcast with an expert in that area, I'll be joining you because that's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll be looking at some authors writing books on the topic, or maybe just some AIs writing books on the topic. I don't know. Thank you so much for joining Read the Bull. It's been a real pleasure, and best of luck, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. All the best.